Welcome back from the short break. My name is Amanda West, and I'm a graduate from the School of Data Science in 2021, and I'm currently working as a data scientist at Daybreak. Daybreak is more than proud to sponsor this session and believes in the importance of furthering inclusive educational opportunities for women in data science. So now I'll kick it over to our session moderator, Arlyn, to get things started.
Hi, everyone. My name is Arlyn Burgess. I am the Associate Dean for Administration here at the School of Data Science. And this is one of my very favorite days of the year is Women in Data Science Conference Day. I have been with the School of Data Science and Data Science Institute before that from the very beginning. And so I'm really excited to see how we've grown. And I love to have these opportunities for major events, especially Women in Data Science, to pull people together. I want to say thanks again to Daybreak for sponsoring this session, and thanks to all of our sponsors who make this event possible. We love the opportunity to create a platform for amazing women doing amazing work, and our sponsors make that possible. So for this really fantastic session, we are excited to welcome back folks that have graduated from our MSDS program from as far back as our very first class, our very first graduating class, and as recently as just this past year. So a lot of great experience in the panel that you're going to get to hear today. We're excited to say that the School of Data Science and the Data Science Institute before that, we've graduated over 200 women from our program since we started the MSDS program, and we're really proud to have such fantastic women working in the field all over the country and the world. Our current MSDS residential program is 48% female, and so we're excited to continue to really pull great women into this program. A little bit of housekeeping. We are going to start by you getting to meet our fantastic panelists and start with a few questions that we prepared for you. But during this session, there is a Poll Everywhere link. So please do click on the link, drop your questions in as you have them for our panelists, and we will get to those near closer to the end of the session. So you can use the Q&A button that's right below the live stream link on the page. So without further ado, I'd love for our panelists to start by introducing themselves. So we'll ask each of them to do just a brief introduction of themselves, the year that they graduated from the program, the role that they're in now, and the path that they took to get there. So maybe we will start with Amanda.
All right. Hi again. I'm back. My name is Amanda, and I am a data scientist at Daybreak. I just graduated from the University of Virginia School of Data Science Master's in Data Science program in 2021. So about 9 months ago. So I've just had my first year of full-time job experience now. Before that, I was at the University of Michigan, where I studied economics and also mathematics. And also I worked as a research assistant first in econometrics, and then I took a job as a data visualization consultant as well. So that's kind of sort of the stepstone path that led me to my eventual choice to go into data science.
Great. Catherine, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Catherine. I graduated from the School of Data Science in 2019, and back then it was still the Data Science Institute. Now I work as a data scientist at Visa in Arlington, Virginia. But before that, I was a data scientist at LMI for 2 years. And before starting the School of Data Science program, I was an undergrad at UVA as well, double majoring in math and Russian language and literature.
Great, thank you. Glad to have you with us, Catherine. And Yirong.
Hi, this is Yirong, and I graduated from our program in 2015, and I'm in the first class of our program. So I'm currently with Shopify as a data scientist. I'm located in Toronto at this moment. Before this job, I was with the ComScore for 4.5 years as a data scientist for innovation team. Yeah.
Great. Well, we're so excited to have all of you and excited to hear about a little bit more about your path and a little bit more about your career, helping all of our participants that are excited to learn more about how you navigated your career. So now that we've heard a little bit about where you are, we'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about how you got there. So thinking some about what were your motivations, and how did you, as you were navigating your path to your current role, what were the kinds of influences that you had to get to your current role? Yirong, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, sure. So my first job was with ComScore. I actually landed my first job with our career fair at UVA, and I was really honored to giving that opportunity there. So I was like 4.5 years as data scientist with innovation team, and the innovation team was more like a research team, which owns the core methodology of the whole company. So over there, like I will hone a lot of my machine learning skills, statistical skills there, and I got like a very fantastic colleagues as well, and like half of them are like PhD and half of them are master. And after 4.5 years, I feel like I have grown a lot as a data scientist from research background, but I would want to try something more different. I want to see like how could my decision drive the business direct decision, having the impact directly. So that's why after that I joined Shopify. So currently I'm with Capital team, where we lend money to our merchants, helping them build up their entrepreneurship, build up their online shops. And I feel that's really fascinating for me at this moment. Yeah.
That's great. Exciting path and awesome growth to see through that as well. Mm-hmm. Amanda?
Sure. So I actually had I was a bit of a late bloomer for data science. So I started out in a very liberal arts oriented degree doing economics with a plan to be a diplomat or work in, international diplomacy of some degree. And I just realized over the course of my undergrad that I was really getting drawn to the more technical side and, mathematics and my stats courses that were, a requirement for my econ degree. And I also worked as a research assistant where now that I realize, with the usage of data analytics and data science, I spend, for example, an entire semester doing data entry when we probably could have used, some web scraping technique to do it in about 10 minutes. So I think having that background and seeing and using data, but using it in a more traditional way. And then when I was a senior, the summer before my senior year, I took a coding class as a distribution requirement for my degree. And I ended up just loving it. I thought it was so great. And it was such a good use of my mathematics background using matrix algebra and arrays and vectors in order to perform calculations in the blink of an eye. And this is basically what led me to realize that I loved the looking more into the intersection between math, stats, and programming/computer science. So I basically had 4 months to pump up my resume as much as possible. And I applied to a variety of masters in data science and data analytics programs, and luckily got into UVA. And UVA was a fantastic experience. It was a 1-year whirlwind of just learning so much about the breadth and depth of knowledge offered by the data science discipline. And that's eventually what led me to also my job at Daybreak. It was through an alumni connection who was also a double who I had seen speak in one of my courses at UVA. And with my job now as a data scientist for the past, less than a year, I've already gotten to work on so many interesting projects, especially in the public good and public safety, public health, and national security spheres. So I've gotten to use data science to help inform search and rescue missions and help better identify, where a missing person might be located. Also to, so for an FDA project that I work on, we work to detect and deter illegitimate products before they reach the US using machine learning. And happy to talk about that more in the next few questions, but I think that it's just been great to be able to kind of realize my initial dream of being able to use programming combined with stats and math to really provide a robust analysis. And gather new insights that you previously couldn't uncover with traditional methods.
I think that's great. And I think that the diversity of what we see in data science in terms of people's backgrounds and where they're coming from and how they got here. I'm a musician by training myself. I'm not a data scientist, but I love this world. And one of the things that I love most about it is the amazing diversity of backgrounds and perspectives that come to the table. And so I think it's really interesting. Amanda, thank you for sharing sort of what your motivations were, because I think that's a huge part of the story that creates how you move forward as a data scientist. That's great. Catherine, how about you?
My path into data science is kind of similar to Amanda's, but I always knew I would go into a technical field. I always sort of had an affinity to physics classes, math classes, and in college, that's sort of the path I took. I knew I liked math, but when I tried to figure out what to do with that, I just wasn't quite sure. But luckily, I took a few CS classes, really liked it. And then I learned that data science was a good marriage of computer science and math, probability. And I took a data science course with Hack-Seville when I was an undergrad, and kind of gave me a good taste of data science. And I figured like this would be a good career for me. It kind of hits all of the topics I like. It's a good technical challenge. It's really interesting. I have to learn a lot of new things constantly. So I applied to the data science master's program, got in, and learned a lot through the program. I got my first job at LMI with, not through the career fair, but through UVA hiring processes with Handshake. And then I worked at LMI for 2 years. And just by nature of consulting, I tried a bunch of different things on different projects. And then last summer, I wanted to try something new. I moved to Visa, where I'm working on their predictive modeling team. So I kind of switched from sort of a government consulting side to a financial services side. So I've been able to explore different domains. And now with the Visa predictive modeling team, very different from consulting in that everything we do is kind of embedded in their actual business, and it affects me day to day. I have a Visa card, so I want all of our predictive models to work well. So yeah, my path to data science was pretty direct in my mind, but I'm glad it worked out, and it's a great field for me.
And so were you a math major in undergrad, Catherine? You mentioned math specifically.
Yeah,
okay.
I was a math major and had to take computer science, kind of like what Amanda said. It was just a graduation requirement, and I procrastinated it because I didn't think it would be my thing, but I ended up really liking it. So
that's great. That's great. So Amanda and Catherine have talked a little bit about their undergraduate background. Yirong, what was your undergraduate background, and how did that play into the way that you got into data science in the master's program as well?
Yeah, for sure. So for undergrad, so I went to Grinnell College. It's also liberal arts college, and I double majored in math and economics. And I think during the college, I actually had like very like interdisciplinary background. Because I double major in econ and math, it's one very technical, the other one is more social science. I also did some summer research at my college as well. One is in the math department, it's more theoretical, and the other one is with the CS computer science department. It's an AI project. I think like all of those different types of background really help me to make a decision into data science. I feel like every time when I use my background to really solve a real life problem, that's I think that's a part most excites me, and that's why I kind of choose this data science. I think during that time, data science is That was like end of 2008, 14, 15. When I joined the program, the data science was pretty new. I think the most popular slogan was like data science is sexiest job in 21st century. I was like pretty old. Everyone was so excited, but we're still like figuring out what is data science. But like definitely I find my personal path into data science finally. Yeah.
It's great. We will argue that it's still the sexiest job. That's fantastic. And so how did you go about the path then of actually choosing the master's program that you chose? So why UVA, why the MSDS program? Some of you have touched on that a little bit in terms of, sort of why you were looking at programs, but what kinds of programs were you looking for? What was it that struck you about what we're doing at UVA? And perhaps, especially for you, Yirong, that's been out for a little while, about what we've done since at UVA that sort of strikes you about data science?
Yeah, for sure. I think at the moment, like I was like first class for UVA data science program. And when I was looking for something, like I know like I want data science, but there wasn't that many programs offered at that moment. My friend like actually pinged me, hey, UVA was going to open a program. I was like, I check out online and I look at the course design, and it covers a lot of topics in data science. And I remember so I feel very excited about that. I just joined that, and I feel like at school, the program has offered me like a lot of resources, like not only the courses we offered here. I was like giving the choice to even like have some selectives, and I even took a marketing class from commerce school, and I really like appreciate that, and all of the help from career services offered by our program was really fantastic as well. And it actually, as I mentioned before, helped me like landing my first job as data scientist at ComScore. Yeah, really appreciate that.
Great. We used to joke about that very first class that you have to be a good data scientist to find the program, because we were so new that we hadn't even put anything out there about how to apply. So that's great. What about you, Amanda?
Yeah, sure. So I ended up at UVA after doing a lot of research, I will say. So I had a lot of imposter syndrome applying to master's degree programs. I applied to 12 when I was an undergrad, because I was so nervous I wouldn't get into a single one of them, essentially. And so I applied like all across the board, like USC, U Chicago, like Tufts, Duke, Georgetown, like NC State, UVA, obviously Michigan. And I ended up getting into all of them, which was like really crazy for me. And so I got, my pick. And I think that I chose UVA for a variety of reasons. One, because they have a dedicated school of data science, and that's not really something that the other schools, any of them had. I think it's still possibly the only and first data science school in the country. And so I thought that was a very strong signal about what they were trying to do with this program. Additionally, they have a lot of dedicated faculty and staff with lots of industry experience using data science. It's a relatively new field, but having that, those people who are coming from Oracle and like banks and like knowing how this is used in industry was really useful. And I wanted to go more applied than theoretical when it came to my master's degree. And then lastly, I really enjoyed actually the fact that it was 1 year. I think I'm very fiscally conscientious. So I liked the idea of just kind of doing this one program in this beautiful city of Charlottesville, Virginia, just 11 months, like getting a huge, depth and breadth of knowledge of data science, and then having also those connections, especially in like the government area, due to its like locality to the DC and like Virginia area. Well, it's in Virginia, obviously. And so I think those were all of what contributed to my choice, but I'm more than happy that I ended up going. It totally changed my career trajectory, and I would not change my decision looking back.
Great. We're certainly glad you made that choice as well. Catherine, what about you? A little bit of a different path?
Yeah, a little bit different. So I went to UVA undergrad, and the School of Data Science was the only master's program I applied to. I got in and it seemed kind of like a no-brainer to me. It was almost kind of like continuing what I was already doing. So I graduated undergrad in 2018, took a month off, and then started the master's. So it was almost kind of like 5 years directly through at UVA. But what I really liked about the program, besides being at UVA, which I already knew I liked and already knew kind of like a taste of different departments at UVA, I really liked the capstone project, and that it would kind of give me a taste of what it would really be like to be a data scientist, have someone sponsor a project, kind of have an open-ended project, and work throughout the whole year to try to create a full data science project, to learn new skills, kind of meet the company's needs. For me, it was the School of Engineering at UVA. So the capstone aspect really drew me in, and then I liked a lot of the electives. So I was really happy in spring semester to take reinforcement learning in the systems engineering department, and the whole package of UVA just really appealed to me. And I was probably biased coming in since I already was a part of UVA, but it was a great decision for me, and it really set me up well.
So we're glad all of you made the initial decision, and I'm glad to hear that you wouldn't have done it differently. You did it over again. But is there anything that you would have done differently, looking back now, during your time here at UVA? Anything that you would have done differently in your experience with the program? And I'll let someone jump in, because maybe the answer is not yes for everyone, or maybe not for anyone.
I can jump in. So there's nothing I would do explicitly differently in the program, but I remember making different decisions at different steps of the program. I feel lucky that I got a really challenging capstone project that I really learned a lot with. And I'm really glad that I took the opportunity with the electives to go into areas that were really interesting for me. Like, for example, reinforcement learning was really interesting for me, but it's not something that companies use regularly. It's not a skill that would explicitly get me a job. It was just an opportunity to learn something cool. And I think I'm glad that I chose that instead of focusing explicitly on my resume, like what are some more topics I need to hit to make myself more hireable or more desirable on LinkedIn or whatever. So I think just following my interests, trying to learn as much as I wanted with whatever I felt like learning at the time. I'm glad I chose to do it that way. So there's nothing I would have changed about what I did.
Add something too. Oh, okay. I'll just go really fast. I would probably say that if I could change anything, I would probably do more connecting with my fellow peers. And I think that, for my program, it was 100% online due to COVID happening, 2020, 2021. And so it was a little bit harder to make those connections with peers, but I think that's so important because everyone's in the exact same boat. Everyone's trying to get their likely first job in data science, and you're all in this together. And that's a very, good time to increase cohesion and to get to know these people who you might be talking to in 20 years, or you might be asking for a recommendation for 20 years down the road. And so I think that if I could do it again, I'd probably do even more, social interaction with my coworkers or colleagues. But, that being said, with COVID, it was pretty hard.
Anything you wanted to add, Yirong?
Oh yeah, I definitely agree with Catherine and Amanda. I feel like I really had a great time and really took the advantage of electives offered at our program. And I feel like after like 6-7 years as a data scientist, I feel like there's no single path leading to data scientist. I remember at UV, I took that marketing class. For my first job, I didn't really apply anything I learned from that class, but like for my second job, I started to work with marketing folks and start to, those are all kicking back, and you'll never know in the future. So I would say like just follow your heart and take the opportunities and just take whatever you are most interested. It may not apply to your immediate next step, but it will be good for you in the long term. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice too. And thinking about how to engage with the program, I think that's great. And again, you all represent some pretty transitional moments within the school. With Yirong being in the very first class, and Catherine, you were right at about the time that we were getting ready to transition. The announcement was made while you were here that we were going to transition into the School of Data Science, and then of course Amanda being in our COVID year, a very special group that was really amazing to get to see everyone. I know when we met for final exercises outside, it was amazing getting to see people more in 3D. So really represents some exciting moments for us within the DSI and School of Data Science as well. Let's shift a little bit and start and talk maybe a little bit about a project that you've been really excited about. So tell us maybe about one of the most exciting projects that you've had the opportunity to work on, either within your job or even as your own side project as a data scientist, something that you've taken on that you've really felt like is an exciting piece of work. Amanda, you want to kick us off?
Sure. So I guess I can talk about briefly my job as a data scientist working on behalf of the FDA. So my company Daybreak is a in part government contractor, so we do work with government quite closely. And at the FDA, one of the primary things that they were working on, especially during COVID, was when COVID happened, all of these hospitals were in need of more masks and gloves and PPE and just general medical supplies because hospitals were just filling up more than usual. And so this led to some, increased demand, which created the opportunity for people who were trying to, maybe make a quick buck to, infiltrate the supply chain. And so what we do, like on the FDA side, is that I work on a machine learning algorithm, so specifically using random forests and, tuning in a variety of ways and adding in features and looking at all of the different facets of multiple data sets to identify a set of features that can help identify if a specific import is, should maybe be examined. It might potentially have a product that could be illegitimate in some way or another. And so by doing that, it's really trying to protect the American people. We're trying to make some really important change within the FDA system of currently, figuring out what imports should be examined and what should be just automatically passed by. And especially in like the medical device industry and the healthcare industry, it's more important than ever to be able to trust the products that are coming into the US. And so that's a really good example of data science that I've gotten to do within a year of my first ever job out of college. And I feel like it's very cool to be on such an impactful project.
That's great and important work. We're all very important for those of us that don't even know that we're the beneficiaries of that kind of work. And I think that's one of the amazing things about data science is really seeing that in action and hearing about all those kinds of things that happen behind the scenes that make things possible. So that's great. What about you, Yirong?
Yeah, so because I have 2 jobs and which are a little bit different, so maybe I I could bring like 2 examples. For my first job, it's more like theoretical. I remember like I was like on the project for like a half a year, and we were developing the fundamental statistical modeling. And I remember like, oh, why don't we actually propose we can make this as a Bayesian framework? And that's really like finally it works out pretty good, and the performance was really good. I found out like I really feel like the satisfaction from the technical perspective, and I feel like intellectually challenged. But for my current job, it's a little bit different. I'm working with a product directly. So we're more thinking about what would the impact of our product onto our merchants, how do we make our commerce better. So last year I was a champion experiment. Like I started with drafting the planning, and I need to talk with different stakeholders such as like product managers, finance team. I need to work with the engineer team to implement the experiment, and then I need to run my analysis to wrap up everything for the statistical analysis, and then propose a business proposal. And I feel like the whole process is very satisfying for me as well, because I know what I do will have a direct impact on our merchants and make them like easier to do their entrepreneurship. I think that it's just like different types of satisfaction as a data scientist.
How about you, Catherine? Tell us about an exciting project or projects you've worked on.
Yeah, so like Yirong, I'll talk about a project from each company because I, like Yirong, they're both very different experiences. So my first project at LMI was very short-term proof of concept to see if we could use OCR and some other machine learning tricks to get information off of transcripts, which is a difficult problem because transcripts are inconsistent. So that problem was very exciting for me, just to have a short-term proof of concept, try a bunch of different methods, learn a lot of different new areas of data science. And it culminated in a white paper. So it was a very short-term project, very creative, very fast-paced. So that was very exciting to me, especially as I started my career. But now a project I'm working on that's exciting in a completely different way is just updating existing processes. So I'm having to learn about big data since Visa has an extreme amount of data, not in the way that I've worked with before. So I'm learning about streaming, and since everything that we use is used, it's not a proof of concept, everyone uses it all the time. To validate all the work that I do, I have to spend a lot of time ensuring that everything is 100% validated. So I'm solving a different set of problems and being creative in different ways to ensure that everything is performing well and is as efficient as possible. And then just, I'm excited to be learning about just big data and how it differs so much from what I've worked with before.
That's great, and great to hear that there's some diversity there in terms of the kinds of things that led you probably to your new career, and opportunities to work on some new things moving forward as well. I think that sounds like a lot of really great work that you all have been doing, and I think that bright futures there in terms of lots of exciting work to come. So thinking back again to your time here at the School of Data Science, so Yirong mentioned specifically about the marketing class the elective that she took that came back up a couple years later, like, I didn't know I was going to use that. And I know maybe Catherine mentioned, there was a class that I took in undergrad that I wasn't sure that was going to be useful or effective. What is something that you did learn while you were in the MSDS program? Maybe tell us a little bit about the class that it might have been in that has come up and whether it was something that you expected or not. I know sometimes I hear from students about, like there's an ethical thing that comes up in their job and all of a sudden they're thinking back to their ethics class, or Tell us about if you've had an experience like that where something has come up in your job where you say, wow, I'm really glad we had this discussion in this class, and exciting relevance that you had there in your work. Catherine, do you want to kick us off?
Sure, I'll kick us off. I have to say that I think since entering the field, I would say all of my required courses when I was a student come up frequently. So deep learning, I feel like I've had to know basics of just regular neural networks, CNNs. I've had to know linear regression, all of the standard things that we learned in like linear regression, data mining, deep learning, I think are essential for your day-to-day. But I think what impacted me the most was probably the capstone, because I think in both jobs, my day-to-day requires a lot of Googling. I have to figure things out. And I think the capstone is where I really learned how to almost start with nothing and then figure out what to do. So I think that was really impactful for my career.
That's great. Do you see, just as a follow-up to that, do you see that any of your projects that you worked on either at LMI or at Visa, do they ever mirror the process that you had with that capstone project? Do they go, so you said you learned how to kind of dig in and find stuff, that was a part of what your capstone was. Do you feel like another part of the process that sometimes that project-based work really kind of mirrored that process of the capstone?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say at sometimes it's less, actually, yeah, I would say as a whole it's similar. Little things from just like learning what modeling techniques to use to solve a certain problem, or like other technical aspects to solve the problem, that would be the same. Like Stack Overflow always helps. And then just in general, trying to figure out what models, what techniques to use, that's the same. With the capstone, I feel like at least my capstone advisor wanted us to read a couple white paper or a couple academic research papers too. I'm currently not doing that to get my job done. It's more practical than theoretical to support what I'm doing. But I think in general, trying to figure out modeling approaches is the same. But I do have to say that the sources where I'm finding it are like supported. But I think it's practically the same process.
What about you, Amanda? What's the lesson that's come up for you from the MSDS program that has been relevant in your work?
Right. I definitely agree with Catherine. I think that a lot of the core classes are really what make up the basis of what I do 90% of the time. In addition to that, just having some understanding of the variety of tools and techniques that are available for data science. So when you're trying to do a creative pursuit, trying to figure out like what model to use, how to implement a problem, it's really helpful to have had the machine learning and the deep learning and the data mining class. I think that probably what I'd say I use just the most, and is the most akin to my job, would be the projects that I did. So the capstone was one of them. And then also for my deep learning class, I actually found a way to partner up the final project with the Department of Wildlife. So we had a clear stakeholder, and we were trying to detect the migration of chronic wasting disease in white-tailed deer in Virginia. And then I also teamed up with Code for Charlottesville to do a criminal expungement project for my data visualization class, which was looking at the different rates of being convicted or charged with a crime depending on your demographics. So like your ethnicity and your gender and like all those different factors. And so having the additional layer of having a clear stakeholder with a deliverable you were trying to really polish and have high quality versus just like getting a grade in a class, I think really helped to jump into the workforce afterwards. And then you have, the same thing, you have deliverable. You're not trying to get a grade, but you're trying to do a really good job.
Great. What about you, Yirong?
Yeah, definitely, I agree with both, and I feel like for technical part, it's like very straightforward. Like I think like for the real life like data science problem, you need to know different types of models, and you choose which one to use. So not necessarily everything you learned in your class you will like implement that in your job. Like, but it's very important to know a wide range of options there, and then when you're giving a real life problem, you know which one to pick. So it's like a little bit different from our like in class exam. Hey, let's use like random forest to do prediction. Like in real life, there's nothing like that. It's more like, you're giving this and let's figure out. So that's for the technical courses, but even for some other ones, not that obvious, I still find it very helpful. So as we mentioned before, the ethics, like as a data scientist, we need to be mindful about the data privacy. And for example, like as a data scientist, every time when I take our data, I need to find out is there any PII data there, so personally identifiable information, and like what should we do with those PII information if we find it over there. Like it's definitely like one of the most important principle we have to comply to, and I find those are not that obvious when you just when you're looking for a job as data scientist, but it definitely becomes a very practical concern when you're with the job, when you are doing the job. Yeah.
Absolutely. All kinds of ethical, legal, other kinds of questions that come into play, certainly. Wonderful. We've got some questions that are coming in from the audience that's participating here. So I want to get to some of those. So here's one that has come in asking about tools specifically. So what data science tools are you using most in your current roles? Amanda, do you want to start?
Pandas. No, but actually I'd say I use Python a lot. So that is using pandas for most like data cleaning, and then, NumPy, scikit-learn, TensorFlow, like all of the typical data mining and machine learning libraries. You can also use there's some natural language libraries, all of that. I don't personally use R a lot in my own job, but I use it a lot in undergrad and in my master's program. And but I do use a lot of SQL. So I'd say using SQL, having some knowledge of SQL, as well as the Python, and then I actually just use my terminal, so bash commands. I use those all the time. So I think it really just depends on what job. But if I'm doing a machine learning problem, I'm probably mainly in Python using pandas and then scikit-learn or something.
How about you, Yirong?
Yeah, I think the tools are really different, depends on which company you're in. But in general, SQL is definitely for both my jobs, I use SQL a lot, and it's really deals with big data very well, and it's a very scalable solution. Other than that, for my current company, we use TensorFlow because all of the data is stored in Google Cloud, and we use TensorFlow to build up the machine learning models. And some other tools, because we're dealing with products, we also have some visualization tool, and which is help stakeholders better understand our data. Yeah.
Great. Anything to add there, Catherine, about what you're using in your work?
Yeah, like Amanda and Yirong, it really depends job by job, project by project. I've mostly used Python. I've only used Python. The past couple of years, I almost exclusively use PySpark, which is very similar to Pandas. It's just the syntax is a little different. I use SQL a little bit, but not very complex statements, but I think you need a really firm grasp of the basics. So I would just say Python and SQL.
Great. So next question really is going back to the program, to the master's program, thinking about the time. I know you all know that's a full-time job to be in the program. But how much time would you say that you were spending, the word here used here is studying, but studying or working on group projects, collaborating with your peers outside of the classroom during your time in the MSDS program? I see Amanda smiling. Why don't you kick us off, Amanda?
I was just thinking probably too much time. I think that for me, it was definitely a full-time job, but I also think that I came straight out of undergrad where I had a very wacky schedule as well. And I definitely just applied the same exact techniques. So I think that there's other people in the program who came from industry and they could cut off and have like a good evening with their wife and, they finished by 9 p.m. every night and they had, frequent like 6-mile walks with their dog. I think it really just depends on you as a person. For me, I worked a lot. Maybe take a little break during the weekends, to be honest.
What about Yirong?
Yeah, it has been while I was in school, but I remember it's a very good time. I think it's a good balance. I definitely spend some time on working on the homework and do the group discussion with others. But overall, I think it's a good balance for me. Yeah, definitely hang out with your data science classmates. Who knows, they will be very helpful for your future career as well.
What was your experience, Catherine?
So I spent a lot of time working like Amanda did, but when I was a student, we had the Dell 1 building, and I remember between classes, everyone was just there doing homework, and you could hear people talking about how to solve different homework problems, what's going on with their capstone. So there was a collaborative aspect organically because of that, and then I would say a lot of my courses had group projects, so that was also collaborative. But as a whole, I was definitely pretty busy. I would say that I put a lot of effort into everything that I don't think everyone needed to do. Maybe I was too young to have good time management. But I was busy, but there are a lot of collaboration opportunities.
Great. The next question, Amanda, you had mentioned a little bit about this when you were talking about your path to data science, but specifically, how would you suggest that someone who wants to get involved with data science gear up those skills, and specifically question here is gearing up their STEM credentials if they're coming from a humanities background. So maybe a little bit of a different path there. But what might your advice be for someone who maybe doesn't have a lot of experience with data science to gear up and get involved with data science in some capacity? Catherine?
So I came from a technical background and I came from a math background, so I was always comfortable with the theoretical aspects that we learned in class, but I always felt that maybe I could do better with the computer science background. I think if you're coming from a humanities background, I think the number one thing you could do to prepare yourself is any sort of computer science boot camp. Just get familiar with R, with Python, so that you can work with data, just very basically. And then I think some essential classes to understand are linear algebra, some basic probability, just like kind of the basics of statistics, just to give yourself a bit of sound footing before you learn something more complicated.
What about you, Amanda? Anything you might add to that from your earlier conversation about your path with your econ classes and gathering some of those extra skills?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Catherine a lot. I think that in order to sort of grease the wheels and for a master's in data science program, having that background a little bit in math and a little bit in computer science and statistics too, but statistics is, math, I think really helps, whether or not it's a prerequisite. So I'd say agree 100%. Linear algebra or matrix algebra is fantastic to know how to do, especially if you're working in something like R, which that's really like the native tongue of R is working with matrices. You don't necessarily need to be taking like crazy proof-based, like super intense math classes, but just things that give you a good applied knowledge of how to perform those calculations before you put them into a computer. And then secondly, with the computer science, there's a lot of really good computer science techniques on, when you're working with bigger data problems and more complex analysis, it can really easily start to like be a lot for your computer to process. So being able to have that knowledge to know how to understand what your computer is doing when you're using data science and figure out ways to optimize it is really why computer science, I think, is great, as well as just like that basic programming. So instead of worrying about if you're like, you have a typo in your code, you can more so focus on the concepts when you're in a program. So I'd say like those are probably what I'd also say. Same with Catherine.
Yeah, that's great. Here's a good one. What skills or tools have you had to learn since the time that you graduated? And some people have had a little bit more time than others, so that may make a difference there. But maybe we'll start with you, Yirong. What have you picked up or learned or found yourself needing to learn since the time that you graduated from the MSDS program?
Yeah, I think that actually happens a lot because data science is evolving very fast. Like when I was in program, I don't think that like TensorFlow was even a thing at the moment. And then all of a sudden it becomes so popular. So last year I was working on our machine learning, like which was a deep learning model. Like I have to like sign up some online course and learn about deep learning. And in TensorFlow, I was like, wow, this is amazing. I think as a data scientist, you definitely want to be very passionate about what you are doing, and you need to be like self-motivated. So you always have that momentum to learn, pick up new things. Yeah.
What about you, Catherine? Have you found yourself picking up new things, learning new skills since the time you graduated?
Yeah, so I think PySpark is the number one thing I had to pick up after graduation, and I use that every day. And I'm at the point where that's what I'm most comfortable with. But in general, I would say big data, all techniques relating to big data I picked up after graduation. And I think that I really need them in my day-to-day. As far as more machine learning things, I feel like in this field, you do have to constantly learn new things, and that's really encouraged in my former job and current job. I constantly hear people saying that I need to get more familiar with AWS, even though a lot of companies have their own cloud-based platforms where you're doing the same exact stuff, but not necessarily using AWS explicitly. So I would say overall, just big data techniques I had to pick up after graduation.
So maybe a kind of a related question. So thinking about, so the other question here is, do you feel like the tech that you learned in the program was still relevant when you joined the workforce? So this is kind of like the flip side of the same question. Did you feel like you had the tools and or the framework such that what you learned in the technology side was relevant as you have evolved in your career? What do you think, Amanda?
I do say overall that the tools and techniques taught through the UVA MSDS program definitely are directly applicable to things that I do on a daily basis. I would say it's the level of understanding that is really what you have to start like really drilling down into once you get your first job out of college. So for example, I had some experience with like AWS, but then now like for my job, we actually use like AWS AWS for everything. And, we have like all of our processes running on the cloud. And so being able to work with AWS on another level besides just for like a assignment is really, the next thing. And then same with, I'd say like all the other things, you're just the times that you're repeating the same types of stuff over and over again in your job versus doing it like a couple times in your program, which I think is just, pretty much just happens. I think that's pretty normal. So yeah, you just get another layer of understanding when you do it every day.
What about you, Yirong? Do you feel like that either the tech and or the platform that you learned has stood the test of time in terms of what you've done in your career and how you've evolved in your career and the tools that you've used?
Yeah, definitely. I think like more or less, like sometimes I always pull out my class notes and check out some technical stuff. Definitely happens. And I remember like in our machine learning class, the professor actually listed out several algorithms to calculate the importance score for random forest. So it's like, so it's actually bring you to another level. It's not like let's load the library and run data through it, do the classification. You actually be mindful, like every implementation could have pros and cons. And I think that particular episode just like came back to me again every time when I was like building a machine learning model in my real job. I need to be mindful, like what was the implementation there rather than like just load the library and run the data. Yeah.
So we've had a follow-up question come in here about the two questions really that we've been talking about. So following up on what you've learned since you leave, where do you go? What are your go-to places for learning new things? And what communities are you a part of to make sure that you're staying up in the data science community? Catherine, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, so I've always had access to Udemy or any sort of online learning platform. LMI initially had access to A Cloud Guru, then Udemy, and then my current job has access to Udemy and other, like a full library of online learning. So I've always had access through my employer for different things. And then as far as deciding which courses to take, what I feel like I need to know, a lot of it came up organically. Like I'll overhear an approach, a topic, I'll like listen in on like what the research arm of Visa is talking about, and it's something I know nothing about, but I can just make a little note and say, okay, I know nothing about graph machine learning or something. And then there's always a course online. Like O'Reilly has a ton of textbooks online. So that's a great resource for formal learning. But as I come across things, honestly, a simple Google will always find you a ton of resources. You can learn anything on YouTube. Yeah, there's a ton of opportunities to learn. It's a matter of just paying attention and looking up what you don't know. And that will always sort of lead you down a rabbit hole of different things you need to know.
That seems to be a good common theme with you, Catherine, being able to find out, go searching for the things that you know or that you need to know, and applicable in how you learn new things and also how you're doing your work. I think that's great. Anybody else have any particular go-tos before we go on to the next question of where you go to keep up on what it is that you need to learn or where you learn it?
I also really love the Medium. So that's a blog. We can check out something really quickly. And once I got really interested, I want to deep dive. I will go to, I will look for some online courses as Catherine suggested. Yeah.
I also love Medium. I think Towards Data Science is great, as well as YouTube videos and Stack Overflow. And what I just personally do is if there's something that I use a lot, then I have my own little like textbook kind of that I make for myself, where I just write down things that I'm learning as I go. And then if I need to revisit that concept, I already have it written in my own words on exactly how to do it. But yeah, I'd say like there's so many open source tools that you could just find pretty much with one Google search.
That is a great idea. in terms of having it in your own words, being able to go back and being able to learn it again from yourself. I think that's a fantastic idea. So thinking about the roles that you're in now, how much are you working with other data scientists versus finding data science problems on your own and explaining the solutions or the problems to non-data scientists? What's your balance there? Yirong, what are you seeing in your work?
Yeah, because my current job is it's directly related to our product. It's my day-to-day basis. I do talk with non-technical people, like product managers, like finance folks, and also like engineers. They're from totally different background with us, and also like I also need to do some like collaboration with our other data scientists as well. Like for my team, like every time when I write up something, I need to have my data scientist peers to review it so we can shape the quality of work. Yeah.
What about the rest of you? Catherine, what's your balance looking like in that capacity?
So I basically only talk to other data scientists. So all of my work is seen by someone with technical eyes. But as far as collaboration goes, I'm not, my current project isn't like a big team collaborating on one project. It's only a few people working together. But yeah, I'm surrounded by all data scientists right now.
And how about you, Amanda? What's the team structure that you're seeing at Daybreak and your role?
Yeah, so I think I'm lucky at Daybreak. It's for people that, basically run the company are all data scientists. And so we're just a very technically oriented company, and we place a high value and importance on understanding the data and using cutting edge tools. And so I think it's more so just like when I'm talking with clients and stakeholders, especially from a non-technical audience, that's when I need to do most of that translation. And then my company is also remote. So despite the fact that we're all data scientists, it's still important that we can all communicate effectively with each other and describe, what our data science thing is doing. Because it's not always off the top of your head, like how X model works or why technique is being implemented. So mostly all data scientists, and then, always got to work on communication though, nonetheless.
I'm loving all these questions coming in, by the way. This is great. So another one about the work that you're doing day to day in your jobs. Do you ever feel like you get disconnected from the impact of your work? And thinking about that, is the impact enough to motivate you? Or is it really digging into the process, the technical stuff, the data modeling, the statistics, all of that, nerding out? Is that really what you have to enjoy to keep you going? Catherine, you want to jump in first for us?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think when as a student, and then initially, I was more about the process. But I think as I've matured in my career a little bit, I'm still very early in my career, but I think I like both nowadays. The impact and the process seem kind of hand in hand to me at this point. And so I think it's a balance of both for me.
What about others? Yirong, what do you say about that?
I think I'm very similar to Catherine. Like in the beginning, my first job was with a research team. Like all of the people around me are super technical, super smart. I really enjoy time working with them, and I feel like I've grown a lot, like how to deal with the big data, how to build up efficient data modeling jobs. And then like I become to realize like I want to challenge myself and do something more different. So that's why I switched to my current job, where I could see my direct impact. I could like by doing my job, I could help more people to get access to financial options, and it will have like a direct impact on their business. And also like I remember like I actually bought something from our merchant, and she just lived like 1 block away from my building, and she literally just like hand over my coffee bean directly. I was like, oh, I feel like, yeah, my work will have impact on them directly. That's what I feel like very, it's very exciting for me. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Amanda? You talked about impact and your FDA work and all of that. Do you feel connected to that most of the time? Do you ever feel yourself getting disconnected in the technical work from the impact? And if so, how do you deal with that? What motivates you?
Right. I think I wouldn't say that I necessarily feel disconnected from the impact. I feel like I always have a pretty good idea about the impact that a given, task is trying to at least, trying to work towards, even if it's in a more minuscule way, like trying to convince a stakeholder to agree that this step forward is the right step. I do think that there is, for me, a difference definitely between impact and process, and it's important to enjoy process even if you love impact. And I think that, with data science, you might be doing something really great, but you also might be stuck in a very, specific niche part of a code base where you're trying to fix this one bug on this one tiny thing, and you might hate that, and so I think I don't necessarily feel like they always go hand in hand, but and I think for my job, there's some more tedious times, but at the same time, overall, it's still very rewarding, and I do like the process, and I also like the impact. So I feel like they can be quite divorced, and so process is what you're doing every day. So it's good to like that too, even if you love the impact.
I think that's great. I think that speaks to really what the person that was asking the question is really getting at too. I think that's great. Question for the job switchers. So for Yirong and for Catherine that have held a couple of positions, when did you know it was time to move on? Yirong, you've talked a little bit about this in terms of, sort of what was motivating you and what your goals were at the time. Would you elaborate maybe a little bit on when you knew that it was time for you to search for a new position in data science?
Yeah, I think always depend on your personal scenarios and not one single solution over there. It's just when you feel like you have been in a comfort zone for a very long time. For me, that's not usually the time I may want to think about move on. And also it also depends on your personal experience and personal interest, what you're looking for at that moment. In the beginning, I was looking for some challenge. I want to build machine learning models. Then I chose my first job, and later on I shifted my focus. I feel like I want to have some a direct impact on the people who can be very close to me. So help me transition into my second job. I really value both of them. It's just Yirong at different moments, they may have different interests at a moment. Yeah.
What about you, Catherine?
I think I have a similar thought as Yirong. I think once you start getting a little bit comfortable and get curious about other areas, I think that can be a good time or a sign that it's time to try something new. I think starting out in a consulting field was really great for entering the field, because I could try out a bunch of completely different areas of data science within a short period of time. And then with the little taste of different areas, I felt like I could, just try a different domain, see what else is out there.
It's great. So I've got a couple questions in here that mentioning imposter syndrome. And Amanda, I think you were the one that had brought this up in terms of, something that you were dealing with in terms of your application process for the master's program. I think this is something that comes up a lot with people in the field more broadly, certainly with women in the field. So talk about, have there been times within either within the program in the MSDS program or in your career that you felt like like you've had or have been dealing with imposter syndrome. And did you ever feel overwhelmed by some of those technical challenges? And how do you overcome those tendencies? I don't think we would say that, that it's necessarily something that you overcome and all of a sudden you're no longer dealing with, but how do you overcome those imposter syndrome tendencies in the way that you deal with your work day to day? Maybe Amanda, I'll have you, since you brought up with the with your application process, maybe I'll let you elaborate on that a little bit first.
Sure. So imposter syndrome is definitely something that I've always struggled with. I also have just anxiety, and I do feel overwhelmed, like definitely by all of the smart people around me and all of the complex problems. So for me, that's, I think, largely because I grew up in a very rural town that was pretty low income. Everyone, my parents are blue collar workers. I didn't really have an example of what it was like to be in STEM or in tech. And I also just thought I was like bad at math for the longest time. And so I didn't really know what an example of going into this field would really mean. And so I think that that's really like what stemmed the imposter syndrome for me. And I think that I really think just patience is, and just being patient with yourself and being understanding with yourself that you can have those feelings and you can still do a great job. Because, for example, a lot of women are, going more likely to have imposter syndrome, even CEOs, and they're less likely to apply for jobs that they're just as qualified for. And, some other guy is going to apply for when he has 20% of the prerequisites and you have 60%. And so I think it's just understanding that there's a gap there between where you think you're at and where everybody around you thinks you're at, and that you can succeed in what you're trying to do. And that being honest and being transparent with people really does go a long way. Nobody's out for your failure. Everybody wants you to see you succeed, especially in the workforce too. And then lastly, when you go from being in school your entire life to being in your first job, that's a completely different switch. You have to completely change a lot of things in your in life. It's just a different way of learning how to be an effective person. And so I think that, again, just being patient with yourself and being understanding, and just knowing that people will value you a lot, even if you're not necessarily valuing yourself. And that confidence will come over time. And I'm still working on it myself. So we'll see how it goes.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate you thinking about that. What about either Catherine or Yirong? Want to add anything in terms of thinking about that?
I'll add something. So I liked what Amanda said about patience with yourself for imposter syndrome. One thing I think is a good approach that I'm also working on myself is from changing my perspective as everything I do is essentially a performance, and I'll be judged on how I'm working every day or whatever, to treating everything as almost a learning opportunity. At this stage in my career, I have 3 years of experience. No one reasonably should expect me to know everything. So why should I expect myself to? So I think by taking a step back, thinking, okay, everything's a learning experience. I'm not being judged as harshly as I think I am. I just need to accept what I know, what I don't know, and try to move on from there. The patience that Amanda mentioned, I think that kind of helps you be a little bit nicer to yourself and honestly have a better experience with everything you're doing.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everyone here. And I remember when I joined my current company, I already had 4.5 year experience as a data scientist. But even though I feel when I joined this new company, I feel everything was so overwhelming. The way everyone do their business day by day, just a different framework. And what I feel most very helpful at the moment was talk to others because you are new, like there's no stupid questions. And you just ask others like, oh, how do you get on board with this? Like what I can learn from that. And it just, I think that's a moment like just feel comfortable, ask for help, and your colleagues will help you definitely.
I think that's great. And I think even the fact that all three of you are talking about this and different parts of your career and doing very different things, I think is indicative of the fact that, you're going to find friends that are that know what this feels like and are willing to collaborate with you and work with you, and giving yourself that kind of grace and patience as well is the best way to really make sure that you're asking those questions, giving yourself the space and ability to ask those questions. I think that's great. And I also think is a great lead in to the next question about career advice, because I think actually there was a lot of good career advice in what you just said, regardless of whether or not it was couched that way. But we've got some students that are graduating soon. So specifically for some MSDS students that are about to graduate, but also more generally, what career advice would you share with those that are graduating soon from data science programs? Catherine, you want to kick us off?
Sure. I'm trying to think of career advice from early in my career as I transitioned from MSDS to my regular job. I think maybe as you transition, like once you have a job, which will be hard for everybody, I think it will be a big transition from school data science to just having a job every day. And I guess be patient with yourself with that and ask questions. And then one thing I noticed when I switched or when I first started working was that there's a lot more about just the company, the business itself that you'll need to learn. So expect that, be prepared for that. It's not going to be like your coursework where everything builds continuously over your entire academic career and culminates in a job. It's kind of a whole separate thing. So I think I would just be prepared for that.
What do you think, Amanda? What advice would you give to graduating folks in data science?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Catherine said. It really is a separate thing from school and from how the framework and the paradigm that you've been really in before. So it's not necessarily, there's definitely really hard parts about learning all of these new concepts and meeting all these people and delivering a product in a way that's different than what you were taught to do in school. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily easy and there's a transition, but at the same time, you can do it. And that's probably when you're going to feel the most overwhelmed, is because the learning curve at any new job, especially for a technical degree for someone with a master's program, is probably going to be pretty intense. And so, just be patient with yourself. I'm pretty sure it probably happens to everybody unless you're really overconfident, which might not even be a good thing. So just know that everybody goes through the exact same thing. And if it's really easy for you, then that's great. You got lucky, but otherwise, there's definitely that transition period. But then it really does get better over time.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Yirong? What advice do you have?
Yeah, I definitely agree with all the folks here. And I feel as a new graduate, definitely try to sort out the resources on campus, when go to career fair to get our resume polished, and try to have some mock interview before you attend the interview. And also I feel as a new grad, I think during the interview, it's very important to keep the communication going on and show them you are willing to learn the new things. I think those are definitely, the most important thing you could showcase to your interviewers.
I think that's great. And it's a process. I know that everybody feels like it's a full-time job to find a full-time job. And so we know that the students, especially those MSDS students that are getting ready to finish their program, they've got, a big task ahead of them, but an exciting one. And I think seeing you all in the work that you have done and are doing is a great motivator for kind of what happens on the other side of that process. I think that's great. So we're about out of time here, but I wanted to make sure that before we wrap up, I want to get a note from each one of you thinking about what's the one piece of advice that you might give to someone that's looking to get into the field of data science. And being the Women in Data Science conference, this conference really is all about creating a platform and highlighting women doing really great work. So thinking specifically about what you did as a woman in the field, what advice you might offer to all people that are interested in getting into data science and really finding a career for them that they feel like has been as exciting as it sounds like all of you all are diving into at the beginning of your careers as well. So since it's our sort of last question here, I'm looking at faces to see who wants to go first. Anybody want to jump in as our first piece of advice? Yirong, there we go. Hop right in, Yirong.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I feel like there's no single route to become a data scientist. And also data science is a very interdisciplinary field. And for my company, I even have a colleague with a major in history and become data scientist. And he's doing like a very fancy prediction machine there. I feel like just be confident about yourself. You definitely can bring a different perspective if you are from a different background. And I feel a diversity of background definitely encourages the innovation. And that's what a company is looking for data scientists. Just be confident about yourself. Yeah.
That's great advice. What about you, Catherine?
I think the number one thing I would recommend is just try as many things as possible in data science. I think that, first of all, that'll give you a lot of exposure to areas and you can find what's best for you, what you like, where you excel. But I also think that experience and knowledge really compounds, and the more things you try, the more things you learn, and that'll just exponentially grow. So I think especially starting out your career, just try as many things as possible.
Great. And Amanda, what closing words do you have for us, advice for those that are going into data science?
Yeah, so I feel like I've talked about a lot about like being patient and all that, but I think that a concrete piece of advice I'd probably say is advertise yourself. So I think that especially, us like being women in STEM and women in data science, we're more likely to under convey our accomplishments than like over, convey them. And I think that advertising yourself is really important. So there's a variety of ways you can do that. There's GitHub, so you can have projects listed on your GitHub with code that people can look at. Like employers definitely look at GitHubs. Your LinkedIn, you can write data science articles on Medium. It's totally free, like anybody can do it. And pretty good amount of like viewership for just publishing on Medium and like towards data science. And that just really signals to a lot of people like that you're really interested, that you're really passionate, and just advertises you as a person, that you're someone who wants to be a voice in the field. So I think that, any way you can advertise yourself is really great. And just being very like sociable, like thanking people after you interview with them, trying to, like communicate effectively. All of those things I think really makes that difference in getting that foot in the door for data science.
I think that's awesome. And I think a great place for us to wrap up to that idea of a personal brand and what that can do for you and your career. And I think that you're right, that certainly the data shows that women are less likely to do that. And I think that, again, that's what we try to do here with this programming for this event. Again, it's about highlighting the work that really fantastic women are doing in the field now. And I think it's exciting for me, having been a part of the Data Science Institute from the beginning, to see the students and that have graduated from the program throughout the years and the great work that you all are doing in the field. I think the future is bright and the future is female, yay, in the world of data science. And I think that that's really fantastic. And so I thank all three of you, not only for your time today, certainly for your time today. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us and to the participants, but also for the work that you're doing and for your willingness to come back and talk to others that are interested in doing that work as well. I think that that's an important part of what it is that you're doing moving forward. Also want to thank our sponsor, again, Daybreak, for sponsoring this session. Not possible without our sponsors, so we're excited. And thank you, Amanda, for being here and representing Daybreak as well. And reminder that, and also thank you for those of you that brought in questions, a huge number of questions from participants today, and really, really great questions that make for an engaging session. So thank you to all of you. Ahead of our next session, we are going to put up a slide with the email addresses for all three of these fantastic women who have agreed to make their contact information available. So if you are interested in reaching out to them, hearing more about their story or connecting with them, that will be available on the next slide, and you can reach out to them directly and connect and continue to network in that way. So thank you for a fantastic session, and I hope all of you will join us in our next session that will be starting here in just a few minutes.